In the Back to the Future trilogy, Dr. Emmett Brown creates a time machine. Marty McFly, his unlikely teenage friend, goes back in time, botches history, and corrects it. Upon returning, he and Doc Brown go on a series of other adventures involving accidentally altering the timeline for the worse and fixing it as best they can. It's probably the most famous series of movies about time travel, and there's a lot going on there. But first, a brief history of time travel. Time travel stories like Back to the Future are predicated on our hope that more fundamental laws of nature are yet to be discovered beyond our current horizon of scientific knowledge. Meaning, when we watch Back to the Future and know that based on our current understanding of the universe, the events can't happen, we are only using the aforementioned present understanding. In the movies, we don't get a lengthy explanation of how Doc Brown solved time travel. He merely invents the flux capacitor, and that sounds nice and science-y, and it's good enough for the audience. So, fine. We watch time travel movies under the presumption that eventually this is a nut that scientists can crack. For example, we used to see the universe through the Newtonian lens, a three-dimensional Euclidean spatial manifold that changes along an arrow of time. In modern times, scientists view the universe and specifically time through the Einsteinian lens, meaning a four-dimensional space-time continuum that curves and in which time has the character of a spatial dimension. Remember when Doc Brown tells Marty in multiple movies in the trilogy that he isn't thinking fourth-dimensionally? Well, it's a reference to that. We know Doc believes in the Einsteinian view of the universe, especially considering he names his dog Einstein. We have quantum theory now, and that relates to time because it entails phenomena such as superposition, think Schrodinger's cat, and entanglement, which suggests the possibility of parallel or many universes. Philosophy has three different models for what time is, and if you want to learn about all three, I did a video on Southland Tales a while back, but today we will focus on Eternalism because that is the philosophical theory of time that matches up nicely with how modern physicists like Doc Brown in the movies and real-life physicists conceive of time. An eternalist believes that time is a fourth dimension constitutive of reality together with space. All times, past, like Doc and Marty in the Old West, present, like Doc and Marty in 1985, and future, like Doc and Marty in 2015, are actual times just like actual places. One cannot designate any one moment in the dimension of time as more real than any other moment, just like one cannot designate any one space as more real than any other point. Meaning when Doc talks about the present in 1985, it is only the present to him. It is no more special than any other point in time. The universe is not existing in the present, it's existing in all time. The universe is thus a space-time block. Everything is one. The appearance of things coming to be and ceasing to be, of time passing in general, is phenomenal, not real. Objects and people from, say, the Old West Hill Valley have equal status with objects from the Hill Valley in the 1980s. A currently dead Mad Dog Tannen exists as equally as a currently alive Biff Tannen. The fact that we cannot interact with the dead Mad Dog Tannen is irrelevant. He simply is not in the space-time region of 1985 or 2015 in the same way that when Marty is in Hill Valley, he is not currently in, say, China. Back to the Future plays fast and loose with causation, the connective continuity of events in the universe. In one scene, Marty basically invents rock and roll, suggesting a predestination paradox. Marty always created Johnny B. Good. The song Johnny B. Good that he knew and everyone else knew in 1985 knew was because of him all along. Time is a block. Everything has already happened. Yet, in other scenes, Marty changes the future, like when he pushes his father out of the way of the car that resulted in his parents' meeting. Back to the Future is not hard sci-fi, though. If time can be altered, it would have immediately been altered after changing history. Time would not have given Marty a mulligan and allow him a few days to put right where once went wrong. But I'm not really interested in poking holes in Back to the Future, at least not from a plot hole standpoint. That's not interesting. Instead, the films present a good opportunity to discuss the potential philosophical concerns of time travel. By the third film, Doc Brown wishes he never invented the time machine because it is far too dangerous. In the end, it is destroyed just as Doc wanted, although he must have changed his mind at some point because he invents a time-traveling locomotive, but that's... whatever. The point is this: would time travel be dangerous? Perhaps, if we believe that time travel into the past is both possible and would have a causal effect on future events. Many scientists and philosophers believe it is not possible due to paradoxes, the most famous being the grandfather paradox. We see a variation of this in the first Back to the Future movie. Marty temporarily prevents his mother and father from getting together, which would eventually result in their marriage and the creation of Marty himself. In the movie, this is represented by Marty and his siblings slowly disappearing. But here's the paradox. If Marty prevents his father and mother from getting married and having children, then Marty would not exist, and Marty would not be able to go back in time to prevent his parents from meeting in the first place. There are solutions to this, though. Assuming that the many worlds hypothesis is correct, Marty can avoid the paradox. If he prevents his parents from meeting, the universe at that moment divides into one universe in which the parents meet and another in which they do not. If the many world hypothesis is not correct, then Marty cannot prevent his parents from meeting and having children. Not because he doesn't have the time machine or the opportunity, but because he didn't. He wouldn't have existed in the first place if he did this. Time has already happened. It cannot be changed because it has already occurred or is occurring at once. Marty can't prevent his own birth because he was born. History is consistent because it could be no other way. This means that even if travel into what he perceives as the past is possible, he cannot actually alter it. Old Biff Tannen from 2015 cannot tell teenage Biff Tannen from 1955 about the sports almanac because he didn't. It didn't happen. Otherwise, the life of old Biff Tannen, who still waxes cars, would not be so. But even if altering the future through time travel is impossible, that does not necessarily mean that time travel itself is impossible. If it is possible, it raises questions about personal identity, something discussed in previous episodes. In Back to the Future Part 2, Marty from 1985 exists in the same time as his older self from 2015. His girlfriend, Jennifer, even meets her future self. Doc Brown meets his past self, even though one version of himself does not realize it. Are there now two Doc Browns or one? Personal identity is also related to the many worlds hypothesis. Consider, again, Marty accidentally preventing his parents from getting married and having children. According to the many worlds hypothesis, he travels back in time through the DeLorean, but by doing so, he also ends up in another universe. Marty is free to prevent his parents from having children because they are not his parents, meaning the same parents who created him before he went back in time. Whatever he does in the past would be consistent with the alternate universe. Remember, time is a block, which means in the alternate universe, Marty's parents just never had Marty to begin with, but only in that universe. So if time travel as seen in Back to the Future is possible, is it actually dangerous? Is it ethical? The fact is that it's difficult to make a moral judgment without having a firm grasp on the science and the consequences. Let's say at the end of Back to the Future Part 3, where Doc Brown for some reason decides that time travel is A-OK again, he goes back in time to stop Jack the Ripper. In the process of killing Jack, he saves a lot of women, and that's good, but time still goes on, right? The interactions these women have with other people could lead to a multitude of events that end up causing more deaths than originally existed. Someone saying hello to a stranger on the street could cause them to be struck by a horse-drawn carriage. How could Doc calculate not only the immediate effects of killing Jack the Ripper, but also the infinite outspreading of changes to the timeline, and determine that this is definitely the right course of action? Imagine this diagram, but going on forever. He couldn't plot that, not even if he spent his whole lifetime traveling through time and watching everyone who ever interacts with the now saved former victims and everyone they interacted with and everyone the next people interacted with ad infinitum. If time is alterable as seen in the Back to the Future movies, everything they do contains a moral risk. This is confusing. You know, if time is a block, aren't all our actions changing the future as much as a time traveler would? As in, not at all, or just as much as a time traveler? This is hard. Okay, so... You know what? Back to the Future Part 2 isn't as good as I remembered. Like, small tangent here, but... As soon as they leave the future with all the cool future stuff, it gets really tedious and convoluted. And part 3 is actually better than I remembered, even though I don't like the setting or the love story. Weird, right? Okay, that's it. I'll see you in the future. Hi everyone, if you like what I do, please click on the orange Patreon link below. That's how this show happens. It's also the only way to request an episode. Also, please like, share, subscribe, and click on the notification bell so that you never miss an episode. I'll see you next week.